He asked, "Are there good conservatories in Russia?" I replied, "Absolutely. What an opera. What a school. What a system. It's so strange to me. How did fate bring me here?" All the questions were answered for me then. I was so happy.
There is a completely unique cultural phenomenon, national treasure of China. I am talking about Chinese opera.
And there was also a Chinese flag hanging right in the hall. So I sang while looking at the flag of my homeland. I was in such a state that goosebumps ran down my spine. No one touched the light. Why would we do that?
Many people remember your performance of Glinka's Tailwind song.
Really? Have you heard it?
Гори, гори, моя звезда, звезда любви.
Zvezda Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks now.
Hello, dear friends. This is the Dynamic Spectrum Talks podcast. So we here build bridges between peoples, nations, and continents, and create crossing of human stories and values instead of barriers. Together, we are trying to lift the curtain that separates us, as well as to find the threads that connect East and West, North and South. I am Anna Shafran. Today's world, as we would like to say, particularly in our program, cannot be imagined without the great Chinese civilization, philosophy, poetry, silk, gunpowder, the greatest heritage and legacy of all mankind. That is why today we have a representative of this civilization as our guest. Today we are greeting here an opera singer, PhD, and an international competitions laureate, Jiang. We welcome you and are very glad to have you here with us.
Hello. Hello, dear viewers and listeners.
Shanjun, our program always starts with a personal story. After all, it is usually associated with those roots and meanings which we are going to discuss afterwards. So, please tell us how your journey to Russia began. What became the wind that once brought you to our country? I would like to mention that even your name, Shanjun, sounds like a breath of east wind.
Thank you. In fact, I have been living in Russia for 25 years. And when I ask myself, how did fate bring me here? I'm feeling surprised. After all, this is already a whole historical period, a quarter of a century. So, how did I get in touch with Russia? If we recall the time of admission to the Institute, the generation of my classmates was born in 1970, 1971. And just in the year when we were going to university, Gorbachev came to China. For the first time since the deterioration of relations between the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union during Khrushchev's rule, the leader of Russia, at that time still the Soviet Union, visited China in order to restore diplomatic relations. And my mates were the first in many years to enroll in the Russian language program. The first Russian-speaking Chinese students. Meanwhile, I applied to university to study vocal studies, while my peers studied in another field more closely related to the study of the Russian language. After graduating from university in 1994, I joined a radio station, and like you, acted as a radio presenter. But I wished to return to the field of vocal art. I love vocals, and felt that I still needed to improve in this direction. At the same time, my fellow students, who had already learned Russian, went to Russia. And this did not happen on their own initiative, but as part of an official program.
So the government sent them to Russia as part of an internship.
Not exactly internships, but rather a business cooperation program. One of my peers, for example, opened the first Chinese restaurant in Moscow. You may know, it is located on Kutuzovsky Prospect. This restaurant was called Wei Fang, but by now the name seems to have changed more than once. Why did I think of him? After some time working on the radio, I felt an inner necessity to return to studying vocals. So I went to the Shanghai conservatory and I did internships for a while. But it didn't seem enough to me. Meanwhile, the restaurant owner I mentioned had just returned to China. We met and I told him I would like to study vocal art abroad. After all, China is not the birthplace of vocals. He asked, are there good conservatories in Russia? I replied, absolutely. And he says, let me find out. That's how, thanks to this man, I entered the Moscow Conservatory in the year 2000. So now you see how the events of that time affected our generation. We became a kind of pioneers, the first generation of Chinese who found themselves in Russia after Gorbachev's visit.
So you belong to the very first wave.
Businessmen are a different story. I'm talking about culture.
Yes, of course, culture.
In the field of education and culture, we were really like the first one. When I entered the conservatory, among those who came with me, only 3 people were from China. There were 80 to 90 Koreans and Japanese, but very few Chinese. So that's the story.
Was it when you entered the conservatory that you settled in Russia?
Yes, exactly. And only then I became a laureate of competitions and started working in this direction. It was very hard to force myself to part with Russian culture. I would like to tell you something else. My first impression when I came to study in Russia was sincere delight. What an opera! What a school! What a system! Not like in our local culture. It does not provide a comprehensive 3D picture, only a fragmentary one. There is no system. And here, I was definitely
inspired by the fact that a systematic approach is implemented here.
Yes, I immediately understood the essence, the nexus. In this life of music, the love of music here has literally captured me.
Great, but we know that.
All the questions were answered for me then. I was so happy.
You'd found that you'd been looking for, and it turned out to be in Russia.
Exactly.
We know the geography of your performances is quite extensive. You travel a lot throughout Russia, Moscow, Vladimir, St. Petersburg, Tver, etc. This geography is impressive, and looking at it, we can say that you are paving your own Silk Road.
Very true.
Can you single out any concert that you remember in particular among these tours? Maybe the audience, the special ambient of the whole, or the atmosphere of the evening left some kind of trace in your heart?
Actually, a lot. For example, my first visit to Kaliningrad, another first visit to Murmansk. These cities have a special significance for Russia, the extreme west, the extreme north. Speaking of Kaliningrad, at that time, I was probably the first Chinese person to be there. I came to the Philharmonic Hall and saw the Chinese flag there. Can you imagine how much it touched me?
Did it resonate in your heart?
Of course, it's so touching. And there was another very interesting incident at a concert in Omsk. That was the first time I went there. The small Philharmonic Hall. The organ hall. Very beautiful. And there was also a Chinese flag hanging right in the hall. So I sang while looking at the flag of my homeland. I also had a great organist with me. And we studied at the conservatory together. Hiroko Inui from Japan. So there were Chinese, Japanese, and Russian flags hanging there together. Quite interesting. This concert is also unforgettable for me. Before the concert, I had a conversation with the host for a deeper immersion into the program. And for the encore performance, we were preparing the song, Burn, Burn, My Star. There's a legend that this song was written by Alexander Kolchak. an admiral of the Russian Empire. And his estate was literally on the next street from the Philharmonic Hall. And as I've been told, he sang this song for his beloved Anna Vasilyevna, if I remember correct. And this legend touched me. Then the concert started, and it went well. And the time for an encore with this song came. Of course, the presenter also told the audience this story. Then I started singing. And, you know, according to the Russian classical tradition of concert performance, the lighting in the hall is not turned off in order to maintain contact with the audience. The lights are turned off only at dramatic plays. And when I started singing,
Гори, гори, моя звезда, звезда любви, привет.
the light in the hall slowly began to fade away. I thought, wow, that's the atmosphere. So I sang well. Everyone stood up. Bravo! Bravo! Then the concert ended. And backstage I asked, who turned off the lights? And they tell me, no one turned them off. And when I sang, I was in such a state that goosebumps ran down my spine. It's a mystery.
It's really a mystery.
I mean, it could only seem to me that the lights were turned off. It's not that my head was boiling, after all. I've been quite experienced on stage. But in my eyes, they really faded away. It became dark. I performed the last top note, and they turned on. And everyone says, no one touched the light. Why would we do that? So it was a very unusual feeling. Let's put it like this.
But at least it tells us about those very vivid impressions that apparently unfolded in your soul.
Yes. In this Kolchak estate nearby, the day before, I watched the movie Admiral and listened to the story of his beloved. And it probably affected me as well. When I sing this song, I get goosebumps all the time. Maybe it had an effect, but it's an unforgettable experience for me.
Shanjun, we have already mentioned the fact that you are not only a performer, but also a mentor, and you work as a teacher at one of the Moscow universities. Please, tell us about your teaching practice. You have already said that there is a strong music school in Russia. Is this tradition really being replicated today? Does it turn out that it lives and breathes even if foreigners can notice it? And does the new generation have a chance to become worthy heirs of the great Russian stage?
Do you mean the Russian younger generations?
Yes.
Of course. Absolutely. Absolutely. This system, the educational system, is very unique. And for me, it is absolutely outstanding. I also have my own social media accounts, TikTok, streams, fans in China. And many people say, oh, the Italian school, or oh, the Russian school. What is a school? For me, it's not just a vocal technique. It's a whole system. It's a special atmosphere. It's hard to explain it with words. I was once asked, why are there only Russian, French, and Italian schools in the world? There are no Spanish, Belgian, Mexican, or Chinese schools. Have you ever wondered why? Russia has a lot of great composers and compositions. A good education system, which educates not only the musician, performer, composer, but also the spectator. This is an entire industry which over time has accumulated more and more outstanding works, traditions, even peculiarities of taste and listening skills. After all, many people today don't even know how to listen. It's like watching football. If you don't know the rules, then you won't understand what's going on.
So it's also a special spectator culture.
Of course, without this, the system does not exist.
Shanjun, and what is this special Russian spectator culture from your point of view?
You know, a genius doesn't need a system to be able to sing. They were born with this skill in their blood. They just need to learn a bit to perform. Conservatory education, if we imagine the entire musical community as a pyramid, is intended for the middle zone. These are orchestras, mass musicians, performers in opera houses, and concert halls. And elementary and secondary education is designed specifically for the spectator. Thus, the system educates not only the best of the best, but all members of this community in general. This is what we call school: how to play, how to perform, how to write, and how to listen.
How to listen, that's it. I'll probably continue your thought here, since I graduated from music elementary school myself. Of course, not to become a musician, but for general education, as my music teacher used to say. And yes, of course, we were definitely sent to the Philharmonic in order to foster a culture of listening to music. It's a special culture,
of course,
and a special skill.
Yes, it's very important, so that you know what a symphony is, what a sonata is, what a concerto is, to be able to distinguish them and trace the dynamics of the world music tradition development through these concepts. This is very important. Spectator skills. But back to the Russian school. One day, my colleague, a pianist and professor at the Moscow Conservatory, Denis Chivanov, he and I traveled to China together. He gave a master class there, and I was touched by his words, which he himself uttered with tears in his eyes, about how many outstanding pianists and performers died during the Great Patriotic War. For example, the virtuoso pianist Emil Gilels performed at the front line. So, even despite the general decline in the level of culture due to, well, for example, economic problems, if the system endures, it will produce great musicians in any case. It's a guarantee, and it never fails. So you would cherish not so much the musicians themselves as the system.
The school?
Yes, it is the school system, the educational system.
Shanjun, you are a baritone and you have already performed a small piece of the romance for us. Many people remember your performance of Glinka's Tailwind song.
Really? Have you heard it?
And people note that in your performance it sounded both as a farewell and a hope. Tell us, please, which Russian composition holds a special place in your soul, your heart? What do you like to perform the most?
I like everything. Otherwise, I would not have stayed in Russia. When I just graduated from the conservatory, I liked academic works more. Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, all the operas, of course. Musicians with a high school degree, like all the most difficult things to perform. But when the concert activity began, and my wife, God rest her soul, loved romances the most. Old Russian romances. And folk songs. But at that moment, when I just graduated from the conservatory, we love arias, Rachmaninoff, the trickiest things, and the rest is pop.
Pop, exactly.
Yeah, pop music. But in fact, not at all. When I had to learn them, but easily, the audience's reaction at the concert was completely different. And I thought, wow. And so it went. Do you know what a stock of old Russian romances and folk songs I have now? And I like it so much. It's so cool. Many times, the audience came up with the words, how you feel the Russian soul, how you touched me. And I love it. More and more of them. It's never enough. But from the vocal specialist perspective, I like Rachmaninoff. And, of course, Tchaikovsky. You say I'm an opera singer, but in fact, I haven't performed much in opera. I love romances, especially Russian romances. I mean, poetry is more on my mind, not plays. I have a very poetic soul, and I love romances. And the more I get to know Russian culture, the more I love it, and especially Rachmaninoff. It's a pity that he stopped composing romances early. When he left his homeland, he no longer wrote them.
And if you take the Russian folk songs you mentioned, which of them would you mark?
A lot.
Эй, ухнем, степь да степь кругом. И вот мчится тройка почтовая по Волге, матушке зимой. И много-много. Кабы Волга, матушка. Вот еще что-то. Прощай, радость, жизнь моя, слышу, едешь от меня. Очень много.
So many songs.
Shanjun, well, in your performance, the Chinese singer performs a fantastic Russian folk song, and we sit here and think, why do we remember it so rarely?
Нет, я сам, мне самому то, что...
In fact, when I remember everything that happened to me, my destiny, the path I've traveled, it's so strange to me. How did fate bring me here? Even 30 years ago, at gunpoint, I wouldn't be able to even imagine that I would live in Russia and sing a Russian song. It's fate. That decided it.
Невероятно для меня даже тоже.
Well, not just for you. A cultural exchange between Russia and China is currently flourishing. We can safely say that. It's like spring after a long winter. More than 230 events are planned as part of the cross-cultural years. Someone says that Russians and Chinese are as far apart of heaven and earth. But the more we listen, the more common ground we find. And even your personal trajectory clearly illustrates this. What do you think are the similarities between our peoples? Do you feel a genuine interest about Chinese culture in Russia?
There is definitely more and more genuine interest about China. And more people are learning the truth about the country. When I came to Russia, there were many biased opinions that stemmed from incorrect knowledge and fantasies. But there have always been experts who study China. I have met such people several times. And I can say that they know more about China than I do. Indeed, for example, those who study Chinese poetry know more poems than I do. Those who study painting talk about those artists who I'm hearing about for the first time, because our country has such a lengthy history, and a specialist in its particular segment will certainly know more than me. As for the national level, of course, we don't need a superficial, but rather a profound and more thorough cultural exchange. It will be valuable and interesting, especially for the Chinese people.
Shanjun, let's take up our conversation about the Russian classical school, I mean the musical school, of course, the musical culture. I would like to discuss with you one thing in particular. You are a person who is inseparably linked to traditional culture, music and vocals. There is a completely unique cultural phenomenon, national treasure of China, with a 1,000-year history. I am talking about Chinese opera. We know that in 2014, UNESCO included Chinese opera in the list of World Cultural Heritage. Yet, even though Chinese opera is extremely popular all over the world, not everyone fully understands what it actually is. Could you tell us what makes Chinese opera so special and what is the essence of it in general? Please tell us a few words about this. Why the viewers still find it very engaging after all these years? What do you think about that?
There is a Beijing opera. It is an absolutely unique art. I am not an expert, but I can tell a few things about Chinese opera. I would like to clarify what it is for those who want to know. Chinese opera is all about performance. Such stagecraft is a complex system, and it's very different if we take, for example, the Russian theater school with the Stanislavski method, or a German theater school with its own methods. It is a completely different story, you see. First of all, I can tell you about the music. Western opera is written by composers. There are particular traditions, certain forms, and some rules. But I don't even know who wrote music for Chinese opera. There are two forms. These are, well, how can we say, two kinds of melodic shapes, in a way. They're used in all musical compositions. These shapes vary depending on the amount of text in compositions, thus creating different variations of music. Composers make music slower or faster, but they still stick to these shapes.
So there are particular patterns, I would say.
Yes, patterns. I mean, every singer has its own way of singing with some nuances, but they still stick to these patterns. So they perform music like that. When it comes to staging, it is also different in many ways. For example, in opera, you sing. When you play Jiang, who is trying to convince his son to come back home, you're expected to sing as if you want to do that. In Beijing opera, we do not do that. We are not trying to be lifelike.
Not at all.
Not at all. Yes. In Beijing opera, they have makeup that's more like a mask. In the West, artists put on makeup to look more like, for example, Leonore in Beethoven's Fidelio, or Jiang or Violetta in Traviata. But in China, makeup is more of a mask rather than just makeup. Each historical hero has its own particular makeup and is always the same. It can be black with the moon. So when you see the makeup, you know who that is.
So there are different types of personalities and they are displayed in their own distinctive way. You know it from the makeup.
Yes, if a character has white makeup, it means that he is the bad one. Dark or red makeup represents fidelity. If you see yellow makeup, it means the character has a temper. You can see that. It's all about the makeup.
There are certain conventional signs by which we comprehend character traits.
Yes, if someone has a white patch around his nose or eyes, he's a comic character. It is very distinctive. Characters also have their own movements, patterns. They are made-ups, not true to life. The way characters move on stage, even the way they look, they taught me that at university. Musicians do something like... It happens all at once, so there is a rhythm.
And there is a gaze.
An artist looks at something, and musicians do like that. If someone is thinking, There it is. All these movements, they're limited, in a way. They're not supposed to look lifelike.
So artists perform a certain set of movements.
Yes, right. The audience got used to that. They know what to expect. They can look at an artist and say, yeah, he does everything the right way. If you do not know how things work on stage, then you will not understand the performance.
Does every Chinese know the rules of Beijing opera, or
No,
you need to have a
unfortunately,
head
yeah.
full of knowledge?
It all depends on knowledge of history. There are lots of uneducated people. It is the question of upbringing, social conditioning, whether people know their culture or not, and many other things. Back in the days, Beijing Opera was much better. Now it is more of a museum for UNESCO.
So Beijing opera is not a public art.
It is quite harsh to master. You need to immerse into this from a very young age. The moves that artists perform, they're more like ballet moves.
Like in ballet, you do this from childhood.
For sure. It's really hard. You need to know not only how to sing, but also how to move like a kung fu master. It's not supposed to be lifelike. It's a true art. Foreigners focus particularly on the moves. There is a Chinese opera called San Chaku. Two criminals end up being in a hotel in the same room. It's nighttime, so it's very dark. Each one of them knows there's someone else, so we can see how they are trying to find their weapons and have a fight. It's like a circus. Very interesting. So, foreigners can watch this repertoire without problems. It's interesting. But when actors sing for half an hour, you don't understand a thing. And neither do Chinese people. Why do we need such repertoires?
At least you are honest. Please tell me, are there any venues or festivals where I can learn more about this art? Because what you've told me is quite interesting. I'm really intrigued.
Well, there aren't many places in Moscow that you can visit. But recently, I've seen that in the small hall of the Moscow Conservatory. There was a staging of a Chinese opera. There are actors from the Harbin Opera House. Oh, they are professionals. Unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to attend. I hope that these stagings will promote cultural exchange.
More people will learn about that.
As I got older, I realized that Chinese opera is a true art. It's a pity that it is in worse condition than it was ever before. As I've said, the quality of opera is getting worse. And this art is already at a stage where it needs to be artificially maintained in order to keep going and to prevent it from being just a museum exhibition.
Shanjun, let's put aside art and culture and talk about the Russians and Chinese. From your point of view, what do we have in common? What unites us? In what ways are we similar on one hand, and what divides us on the other? Have you thought about this?
Oh, this is a huge topic. I didn't really think about it. It's hard to say like that on the spot. We're not the same, but we are close. Yeah, close. If we compare with the Europeans, Chinese culture is closer to the Russian one.
In the context of mindset.
For example, if we talk about folk songs, Chinese people love these minor melodies. They're close to us. But if we talk about German folk songs, I don't understand them. What is it? What is the difference between Schubert's romances and folk music? The Chinese see no difference. But Russian songs are close to us.
It turns out that at the level of a national cultural code, Russians and Chinese are closer to each other.
Yeah, closer. It was like that in China since Soviet times. Back in the days, we had a similar cultural education, especially the older generation. It changes from generation to generation. For example, I have just sang. Maybe not everyone in Russia knows that song, but in China, we do know it. Everyone. You can check for yourself.
It's very interesting.
Well, there's a Chinese version of this song. Yeah, it's another version, but the tune is the same. Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't even mention Moscow Nights and Katyusha. I'm talking about Troika.
Why are these songs, Moscow Nights and Katyusha, are so popular in China?
It is the Soviet heritage.
From the Soviet times, okay. But as for values, we very often reflect on these topics during Dynamic Spectrum Talks program with our colleagues from the West. There are lots of people with common sense. They are still the majority, but they are not given a say in Western countries. Today, due to the promotion of an ultra-liberal agenda, they largely complain that they do not have the opportunity to bring up their children in the spirit of traditional values as they were raised by their fathers, mothers. If we talk about China, we know that it is...
We have the same problem.
Yes, it's completely different from the situation on the West. I heard one story. It would be very interesting to ask you what is happening in China today, because it's clear that traditional values are always the foundation and the stronghold. However, there are certain trends that are not welcome, such as the more feminine image of men. On Chinese television, for example, men are expected to be very masculine, while women are expected to be feminine. What is the attitude from the point of view of everyday and official culture to this topic in terms of values?
Traditional values? People in China are very conservative. I would say that traditional values are very important to us. And in these terms, from the Russian perspective, we are very close to each other. However, we have Western influence in China. There are more and more of those who promote non-traditional ideology and way of thinking. But the main ideas are still based on traditional values.
But is there a general discussion about this at the level of Chinese everyday culture, or is it more of a marginalized movement in China? Well, I mean ultra-liberal agenda, so...
Not really. We believe in traditions. Traditions are important. Well, when you read the old literature, you realize that there always have been non-traditional values. They have always existed, but they have never been a part of the main culture. It has never been like that. It cannot be. We accept it, yes. But if there is something wrong with you, don't tell us that we're supposed to be like you.
Maybe you accept them under the influence of Confucianism, or is it something more profound? What do you think?
I think that we just never paid attention to these people. Yes, they exist. They definitely exist, but I have never thought that they can have any influence in many spheres, even in politics. I could never imagine that. Nowadays, this is a very pressing issue for everyone.
If we talk about the average Chinese young men and young women, what are they thinking about? What are their ideas and what are they striving for?
You know, we have some problems now in terms of the younger generation. The Chinese population is large. But this generation is smaller because, you know, it was prohibited to have more than one child in a family. We used to have a one-child policy. So there are parents, grandparents, and then a child with no sisters and brothers. And the whole inheritance goes to him. Therefore, Many people are now thinking, why should I work if there is such a strong competition and it is very difficult right now? I have everything, a big pension, lots of money. I'll just stay at home. I already have a few apartments. Why bother? There are such young people. I would not say that there are a few of them, actually. There are quite a lot of them. And this is a big problem in modern China. We call such young people, which means couch potato.
So it turns out that basically this is a common problem, not in a particular country. I mean the new age of individualism and egoism.
Right. They say if I get a job or do something, for example, enter university or start a business, I'm more likely to fail. If I do nothing, I won't lose anything because my parents and grandparents will provide for me. They have everything I need.
It's very interesting because not only Russians, but also people from Western countries, I believe, have a stereotype about China, that it is a very traditional country focused on preserving its own way of life. However, in the modern era, in the 21st century, these global issues related to the primacy of individualism are affecting even Eastern civilizations.
Of course. Well, I'm not sure if you know, but it is really hard to pass exams after high school and enter university. I mean, I'm talking about Chinese youth. For them, it is the hardest
challenge.
Yes. I can say that it is life-changing. Back in my days, I remember how it was before. Not everyone could enter university. It's very life-changing. Nowadays, many people can do that. But there are different types of universities for people from different backgrounds. When you graduate and start looking for a job, it's not as was before. So those students who are very hardworking, they have a better education, more social resources, and
in China,
a better life. Students who are less fortunate think, why do I need to enter university? I can't compete with the others. But my parents can provide for me, so I can do nothing.
Well, it turns out that this topic, for example, which is currently at the forefront in Russia, I mean the topic of family demographics, is very relevant for China in almost the same form. This is our common problem.
Sure. It's a global problem.
You are a person with Chinese roots, and so far we can say that you have a significant Russian background. What we can do to overcome these problems?
I don't really know. I look at what's happening in the world right now, and I really want this to be tackled in Russia, to prove that traditional values are more important than anything else. I want everything to return to normal, and for this nonsense to stop. The liberal agenda will always exist, but it can't be the leading ideology.
Well, we come to the idea that this is an unshakable foundation of civilization without which it is not just difficult but impossible to move forward.
Yeah, it's really important.
Well, let's assume that we have a lot of important and serious work ahead of us. However, there is also a great hope that we, I mean Russians and Chinese, share common values, and most importantly, as we discussed today, there are areas of cooperation such as culture and art which are inherently designed to unite, to promote reason, goodness and eternity. I would like to serve this high goal in the context of Russian-Chinese cooperation. Thank you for familiarizing us with Chinese culture.
Thank you so much for such a great interview.
Dear friends, today we had with us Shangjun Jiang, an opera singer and laureate of international competitions, a brilliant Chinese musician on a Russian soil. This is Dynamic Spectrum Talks podcast. Until next time.
See you!
Zvezda Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks now.